it can be lonely because even within your tightest groups, sometimes you're the one that's trying to grow in a particular way, and the other people in that group just aren't there with you in that moment.
Can't do it
So
yet.
it's not even it's not necessarily that you have to cut them out, but they're not there with you. Most conversations about connection tell you what to think. But are easy answers ever enough? I'm Keith Richardson. With my co-host Gerren Taylor, this is More in Common. Honest conversations about what keeps us apart and what doesn't have to. Come think with us.
This is the More in Common podcast. I'm Gerren Taylor. That's Keith Richardson, who now knows how to Dougie. And welcome to the show.
You're stuck. We did not Dougie in this, Dan.
No?
No.
I don't know. Now I have feelings. Now I've got disappointments.
Hey, look, at the end of the day, there is a component of this desire for this podcast for me that I've never verbalized to you, I don't think, is I think in America, we are lacking, and we talked about this last week, just a basic set of social expectations. And I'd love for those to be rooted in, fair critique, honest communication, allowing people to make mistakes, and understanding that this shit's all complicated and we need to stop holding people to perfection standards because they're not
Amen.
you.
Give yourself some grace too, like we're all in this together in a way or another.
Like accountability, being able to admit mistakes and not have your entire life upended because you screwed up one time. We've been on this arc though, Gerren, and I think it's a reflection of the nature of deep, vulnerable conversations. Is they can't happen all the time. They can't happen every day because they can be exhausting, especially when it's uncomfortable for you.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we wanted to talk about this week as we close out this arc, about the gap between who we are as ourselves as hosts on this show and how we show up every day. But really, it's about all of us, right? It's about you, the listener, the audience. We all have an ideal form of ourselves, an ideal version of ourselves that we don't always have the bandwidth to show up for or to be. It doesn't make you any less of those things. It just means that we have to accept the ebb and the flow and the variance that is kind of the nature of not only this type of work when you're working on yourself and you're working on communication, but just being a human being in general and trying to show up with the best you got that day. But really talking about what does it cost to maintain the gap, so to speak. And what you talked about, I think, is the main one that most people experience, is the emotional energy expenditure of doing that, right? We always talk about on the show, your brain tries to default to safety, psychological safety. But in that same sense, it also tries to expend as little energy as possible, so to speak, on making decisions when those decisions can be easily categorized or easily done, right? So that you conserve the energy that it takes for other things, because who knows what you might run into. That brain's always trying to protect you. And
look at you bringing that expertise. Ain't that the facts?
see, we talk about a lot of deep stuff on this show, but I think long term, what do you think? For instance, Keith, in this arc, you talked a little bit about running into the situation where people are talking about the show and you find for yourself that you don't have words, right? But part of the cost of that show is you're missing selling the greatness of what we do here to that person and everybody who's listening around you, right? Because, I understand you're like, hey, sometimes I worry about the judgment of those people, but that is part of the packaging of that sell to that one person that's asking. is that other people around can hear as well. So what do you think for your own growth? How do you feel like you're gonna face that challenge moving forward?
Yeah, I think, I'm going to answer this a little differently than you're asking it. Um, and then come back to a direct answer in it. Like the cost, I know for me in not doing these things is the shame and guilt associated with not being the complete 100% perfect person that we talk about being in all of these shows, right? Like these are all the things. And we're the voice behind the More in Common podcast. So we must live up to these things all the time. And I feel that. And that's self-imposed. There's nothing because, going back to what we talked about over the last couple weeks, is this podcast for me is me. It isn't just me trying to present some other version of me. And I think about like, as an example, or two examples come to mind. My children, number one, raising children. I have two young ones, 9 and 7. It's exhausting. Parenting's hard. You're constantly repeating yourself. You're constantly asking for things to get done. You're wondering why your child uses the household as a trash can, and at what point in time I've ever demonstrated that as acceptable behavior. Um, as happened last night when I opened up the bathroom drawer and just saw a year's worth of open Band-Aid wrappers just right in that
That's actually
drawer.
kind of incredible.
And then this morning, my youngest, as I said, please throw out this trash, put it in the container that holds our uh, large serving utensils. Like, why is that a trash can? And when have you ever decided that was a trash can? And by the end of a day, when you're completely taxed, emotionally, mentally, physically, and all of those things, to your point, conserved energy, if you have a really physically taxing workout, as an example, that drains your overall ability by the end of the day to navigate emotional complexity or mental complexity. And I frequently find myself at bedtime frustrated and then going, dude, you teach emotional awareness. You're the adult here. Get over yourself and be the adult. And yet I'm so taxed that I have a really, really hard time regulating. And that comes the shame. I'm supposed to be better at this.
Yeah.
And here I am not. Or when my wife and I have, we have an occasional fight, like a real fight, not just a bicker argument, like a real fight. And I go into fight mode and I physically feel myself so myopically thinking about one point. And she takes the posture of maybe we should step away and come back to this after we've had some time to relax and calm down. It's like, no, that's my job to be that person, to do that. And yet here I am being the one that's failing at that. And then the shame and the guilt. So then coming back to your point, when I don't do the promotion of the show in a meaningful way, it isn't that I'm not giving myself an opportunity to promote the show. I'm not, when someone comes to me and asks me about the podcast and I clam up, and it's like when someone asks me what I do, I don't ever have a good answer for what I do. When I worked at Microsoft, I used to say, yeah, I work at Microsoft. It's not an answer. That's just telling you where I work. So I don't have to actually explain what I do because I don't want to answer that question. This is again, me not giving any real vulnerability to answering those questions. And the podcast thing isn't as much as I don't want to advertise it, I don't want to promote it, I don't want to do all of that. I am not I get the shame and the guilt because I don't know what to do right now. And wait a second, isn't this what we talk about on the podcast? Is talking about these things with people, and here I am just not having this conversation. So I will tell you on the flip side, like one of our most avid listeners is my father-in-law. He listens every day.
Shout out
He's
Mr.
even
T.
playing he's playing he engages with us online, listening to past episodes that Rodney and I recorded. And I think that's such an awesome and amazing thing. It makes me feel so good. And I am working to engage more in those conversations because he brings it up and then we like, it doesn't have to be the deepest of conversations, but I am practicing that actively so that when the random person talks about it, I gain comfort in sharing that side of me and doing that vulnerable thing. So for me, this is it is an intentional effort. It is an attempt to remove my own judgment and just do it, not seek the perfect words, not seek the perfect explanation, not seek the perfect acceptance of what we do, and just allow a conversation to be a conversation and let the conversation flow as it needs to be around the topic that they brought up. And that's our podcast, treating it like any other topic that exists. Similarly, if someone asks me what I do for work, I got laid off. I'm actually just now getting comfortable saying, unfortunately, I'm not doing anything because I got laid off. So I'm looking for a job. I spent 6 weeks after getting laid off not answering the question. Like I'm in sales. That's what I would say. Right. So it's not easy. I don't succeed at it all the time, but I am actively working to get better at that for the benefit of our show, but also to continue to be the person that I want to be and recognizing when I'm in the mood and when I'm not. I think that answers your question. Took me a ways to get there, but
It did, and you have a way of doing that, but that's okay. I mean, I think that's part of the exploration that we do on this show too. Is like there is no easy answer, so trying to have you succinctly say that in a minute and a half or a 90-second quote is exactly what we're working against, right? In some ways, in the work that we do on this show, because an easy answer would be a short answer. In some ways, we can't always make a nice soundbite of a messy life. Um, and I
But let
think
me
that is
flip it back to yeah, but I'm curious, you brought up the cost, and you talked about over this arc, the new relationship and engaging with the honesty from the Jen Oliver conversations. We've talked about different examples in the allotted, the limited time that we have, even though it's over the course of, hour and a half. What have you found the cost of really practicing what we talk about to be for you?
a solid question. I think it makes you. I think that I have experienced the tough decisions about what I did for comfort me as opposed to growth me. Um, People who I would let in my life or give access to me so I would feel better about me, as opposed to whether or not those relationships or situations were good for me. Um, that has not only cost me, right, in the sense of like you don't have those people or friends if you make decisions that like, okay, this isn't healthy, I need to cut that out and stop doing that. Uh, but also it creates a lonelier place than I think you expect it to be sometimes. And that has its own challenges. But I think at the end, and as we talked about me entering into a new relationship, like, would I have created space for this new relationship, which I think is much better suited to me if I had kept doing the things that I knew ended poorly? But that requires me being honest with myself about what I'm doing that doesn't live up to who I'm trying to be, right? Especially when it comes to communication about needs, wants, being honest, and how people interact. Like, I'm a lover. I love love. I like being in love. I like the feeling of love. But sometimes people can couch that in other things in order to take emotionally from you and not give back, or financially or otherwise, depending on what situation you may have going on. Uh,
You said something I think that's super relevant. Thank you for sharing that. Sometimes it can be lonely to be on that growth path, making those and the irony of the cost of everything that we talk about for you is the thing that we talk about solving for in a lot of ways is that loneliness. What is that loneliness?
well, remember we did that episode, The Cost of Being Right? It's kind of like that. Like, you have to decide which battles are worth preserving the friendship or relationship for or not, I think is where I'm going with that mostly. And coming to the understanding about what that is and what that looks like. Like, trying to understand why you go back to something that you know is probably not the best for you, and really trying to be critical of that is very hard because we come up with a lot of excuses and reasonings. And so sometimes you've built so many of those little pieces to keep yourself occupied. At least this is something that I found that I do. You build so many of those little relationship or pockets or pieces to keep yourself occupied that you don't realize that a lot of what you do is built around those things. A lot of how you occupy your time is built around those things. And as you start cutting them out, then you're only left with yourself.
Oh, like
That can
this really calls back to identity and like the cost of it's not the change of identity so much as it's the full acceptance of your identity, which might require you to remove things that are entangled, that seem like your identity, but they're not. And it's super challenging because it can feel lonely being on we'll call it a growth path when others around you aren't on that.
exactly. And then making the hard decision that, like, hey, those around me aren't on this same path. Like, perhaps that's holding me back. Perhaps it's not making me force decisions that I should be making. Maybe that I'm returning to these places out of comfort instead of the hard growth question. And
Because yeah.
yeah, facing that, just facing that.
And the truth about social ecosystems, as we've discussed, many of our social ecosystems are choice based. The ones that we grew up with, we probably might not be around anymore because half of the group moved away and the dynamics of the group are different. And so now we've found new groups and we seek those groups and integrations. And maybe that group isn't the best group for us, but finding a new one is hard because the one we just found is hard. And maybe it wasn't the right group for me. And maybe so I mean, there's so many permutations about this. And I think one of the things that really is intriguing about what you said is it can be lonely because even within your tightest groups, sometimes you're the one that's trying to grow in a particular way, and the other people in that group just aren't there with you in that moment.
Can't do it
So
yet.
it's not even yeah, it's not necessarily that you have to cut them out, but they're not there with you. So it can feel isolating because you're doing a thing no one else is doing. And I think that's a real interesting clarity on what I see as a benefit of what we provide is this idea that it's all hard. We're navigating it too. We accept that the navigation is hard and join us in navigating that difficulty once a week through these conversations. Share with us stories, share with us what you've got going on, like recognizing that even in your tightest groups where you're not going to leave them or make those decisions, but you're just in a place right now where you're growing, that so many other people are too. And you don't have to be friends with all of those people, but you also don't have to be alone in that growth journey. And I think the other thing that comes up for me when you're sharing that I think is so critical is that we can't be growing all the time. To your point about cognitive fatigue, there are just times where what is and allow it to be and accept it. And you don't have to be on this constant striving to be better through all things. Sometimes it's nice to just sit back and watch someone else do it and just be content with where you are in this moment and pick up your growth journey in a month or 2 months when you now have the energy to do it.
Try it again tomorrow. We
Try it
talked
again tomorrow.
before this on the show about giving grace to yourself and giving grace to other people in these moments of of growth and trying to expand your abilities. And I think this is one of those ways of thinking about it, right? Like, as we all examine where we fall short of the goals we set for ourselves and just ask maybe once or twice, what is this costing me? And what is it costing the people around me? Like, where could I be getting if I could work on this? And I think our ability to do this work, honestly, as hosts and as guides and sometimes subjects of the show, uh, lies in that space as well.
I will tell you that when you said that, like I felt that. And I going back to your question about the, talking about the show is there's a moment of reflection in you saying that makes me wonder, it's part of my difficulty thinking that they're not on the same journey I'm on. So I'm feeling isolated in it, and I'm there's a lot of fear of sharing that journey with someone who's not ready to receive it or isn't on it because of that isolation and loneliness. And then when people who are on it reach out and I'm like, I'm freaking out, right? Yeah, it is a interesting reflection, and I appreciate that. Like that is a real honest sentiment, and I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, man, this has definitely been a journey, I think, for both of us, in that type of deep spiritual revelation about not only what we do, but our relationship to it and how we continue to navigate through it. Uh, like the tagline says, hard questions, no easy answers. But I am glad to be on this journey with you, Keith. I'm glad that you get to share more about you with our audience because, like you said, I think that people get a really, direct analytical view of Keith, and not the whole real rounded view that I get mostly as your homie and co-host, co-worker. So it's important, I
Yeah.
think, that we share this time with our audience.
Well, I appreciate this time. Break the fourth wall, because I think it's relevant only in this point is that generally when we record an arc, we record it all together and then break it up in production. So you experience this conversation over an hour and a half, over 3 weeks. Well, we've done it for an hour and a half. And I'm going to say I am at a point where I am cognitively fatigued in a way that I not normally am in these conversations. Um, and I have nothing else to give today, to be
Yeah, you
honest.
tapping out. That's it. That was it.
Yeah.
I hear that, man. I hear that.
I'm spent.
That's okay. We'll close the episode hopefully with a video of you dancing, and then that will be the last 4 minutes. No, I'm just kidding.
And if not, I don't know. I don't know if it'll be available. If it is, cool. If not, TBD. To be continued on that front.
Well, I mean, I think this is a great place for us to wrap up this arc of self-examination that has spurred more thoughts in Keith as he's reflectively thinking. And as well, I mean, this is what we do here. We try to unpack heavy stuff and we deal with it just as much as you do listening. But thank you again for joining us. This is the More in Common podcast. I'm Gerren Taylor. That's Keith Richardson. Be sure to check us out on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and wherever you get your favorite podcast shows. Leave us a comment there in Apple or YouTube. Send a thumbs up or a like. Share this show with a friend. There's a lot of catalog here for you to go back through as well, where we talk about modern masculinity, dealing with the manosphere. We talk about intergenerational connections on this show. We talk about a lot of deep things that allow us all to kind of expand how we look at the world, how we communicate with each other, and hopefully make that communication better. So thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you all next week.